If you want to survive the modern climate crisis, the blueprint isn't sitting in, like, some high-tech laboratory in Silicon Valley.
Oh, definitely not.
Right. It has literally been sitting in plain sight, just slowly crumbling on a rocky hill in Greece for roughly 2,500 years.
It is a phenomenal paradox, honestly. I mean, when you walk down the street in any major city today, you're just surrounded by these towering glass and steel skyscrapers.
Yeah, totally.
We feel like we've conquered the sky. We view these structures as the absolute pinnacle of human achievement. But, as the climate shifts and these massive superstorms become the norm, those impenetrable fortresses suddenly look, well, incredibly fragile.
Which brings us to the core of today's deep dive. We're looking at a really fascinating stack of sources today. They're all centered around an excerpt and a brilliantly detailed table of contents from a new book. It's called ArchitecturalArchiveNovel, Parthenon Temple. And our mission for this deep dive is to explore how a ruined ancient temple holds what the author literally calls future technology, like the exact knowledge humanity needs to survive.
Yeah.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because, the author is an architect who spent 20 years advocating for modern, eco-friendly design.
Right, a long career in that space.
Yeah, so suddenly pivoting to write a novel about ancient Greece, it kind of seems like throwing in the towel,
It does look like a retreat at first glance, but it's actually a massive leap forward. After 2 decades, the author realized a really hard truth.
Which was?
That just slapping solar panels on a glass box or, pumping in better foam insulation, it isn't going to save us.
Right.
And those are just technical Band-Aids on a deep structural wound. We don't just need new materials. We need a fundamental shift in our mindset about how and why we build.
Yeah.
We need to rediscover what they call the lost principles of dwelling. And to communicate that effectively, a dry engineering textbook just wouldn't work.
So they wrote an architecture archive novel instead.
Exactly. They use 2 fictional characters to kind of anchor the hard architectural facts. So you have Dr. Lee Han, who represents cold, raw analysis.
Like the math side of things.
Right. He's the engineering, the load-bearing calculations, the pure data. But then you have Grace Kim, who brings this warm insight. She represents the human connection to a space.
The philosophy of it.
Exactly. The breathing life of a building. The author uses their dynamic to bridge that gap between rigid engineering and humanity.
Wow.
The entire book is structured as this archive of hope. It's literally a survival map hidden in the ancient ruins.
I find that dynamic so fascinating because it completely reflects our current building problem.
Yeah.
Think of how we construct modern structures, like a solid concrete and steel bunker.
Right. Very rigid.
Yeah, they rely entirely on brute strength. They just stand tall and arrogant against the elements. But the problem with absolute rigidity, like a really stiff tree in a storm, is that when a force finally exceeds that brute strength, the structure doesn't bend.
It just snaps.
It just cracks and shatters. Yeah, like a Category 5 hurricane hitting a skyscraper.
No.
And the author suggests the builders of the Parthenon took the complete opposite approach to this.
It absolutely did. They didn't view nature as this enemy to be walled off and defeated. They viewed it as a reality to be accommodated. And that accommodation starts with the actual visual reality of the building itself. Like, when you look up at the Parthenon, your brain immediately registers these perfect, imposing, straight lines.
But here's where it gets really interesting. The ancient Greeks, led by the designers Iktinos and Kallikrates and the sculptor Phidias, they basically built it completely wrong on purpose.
Yeah, it's wild.
There are virtually no straight lines in the entire structure.
It is honestly one of the most brilliant architectural secrets in human history. The foundation floor, it's not perfectly flat. It actually bows upward in the center.
Wow.
And the columns are not straight either. They tilt slightly inward. And this was all driven by an intimate understanding of the golden ratio.
Okay, wait, let me make sure I'm visualizing this correctly for everyone. The golden ratio is that mathematical proportion, right? Like roughly 1 to 1.618 that we see everywhere in nature.
Yes, exactly.
Like the spiral of a nautilus shell or the way leaves grow on a stem. Our brains are basically hardwired to find that specific proportion aesthetically pleasing.
That's the absolute foundation of it, yeah. But applying the golden ratio to a massive three-dimensional stone structure isn't as simple as just, drawing a spiral on a piece of paper.
Right, because of the scale.
Exactly. If you build a massive temple with perfectly flat floors and perfectly straight parallel columns, you run into a biological problem.
Which is?
The human eye is flawed. Because of the way our retinas process massive parallel lines against a bright sky, a perfectly straight column will actually appear to the human eye as if it's pinched in the middle.
Oh, weird.
Yeah, it creates this optical illusion of weakness, as if the columns are literally buckling under the weight of the massive roof. And a perfectly flat floor, stretched out over that huge distance, will look to us like it's sagging in the center.
So if they built it mathematically perfect, it would actually look geometrically weak to the people walking up to it.
Exactly. Or rather, it would look flawed to our specific biology. So instead of arrogantly demanding that the architecture remain mathematically rigid, regardless of our flaws, the Greeks accommodated us.
That's so cool.
They bowed the floor upward just enough to counteract that sagging illusion, and they used a concept called entasis on the columns.
Wait, entasis is where they thicken the middle of the column, right?
Yeah, yes, that's it.
But if you purposefully make a massive stone column bulge in the middle, wouldn't that just make the building look, I don't know, bloated or pregnant? Like, how does that fix the optical illusion without just creating a weird new one?
What's fascinating here is the absolute subtlety of the math. We're talking about a bulge of maybe a couple of inches spread over a column that is 34 feet tall.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it is virtually imperceptible unless you are taking precise laser measurements. But that tiny calculated bulge perfectly cancels out the optical illusion of the pinching. So to the flawed human eye, the column appears flawlessly straight and powerful.
That is incredible. They literally manipulated thousands of pounds of solid stone just to compensate for the human retina.
Yeah, the author calls this the aesthetic of imperfection. It's the pursuit of visual truth over mere mathematical rigidity.
Right.
It reveals a profoundly humble attitude toward humanity. They adapted the architecture to the reality of the human condition, not the other way around.
And from what I read in the sources, that humility wasn't just about making the temple look pretty from a distance. That intentional imperfection actually provided incredible functional resilience, too.
Oh, absolutely.
It's what makes the Parthenon a piece of 2,500-year-old future tech. Like, take the climate control, for instance. Today, we just expect the environment to submit to our buildings.
We force it to, yeah.
We install massive HVAC systems to force the indoor temperature to remain exactly 72 degrees, burning just incredible amounts of energy. But the Parthenon managed environmental comfort without a single watt of electricity.
Which is mind-blowing. If we connect this to the bigger picture of our current climate crisis,
Right.
Their understanding of materials was light years ahead of our standard drywall and glass.
Yeah.
They used Kentelic marble, which they harvested right from the local Athenian mountains.
And they didn't just choose it because it was a beautiful gleaming white stone. They chose it for its thermal mass. Right.
Exactly.
Because marble is so incredibly dense, it acts like a thermal battery.
Yeah.
So it absorbs the scorching Mediterranean heat throughout the day, which keeps the shaded interior nice and cool.
Mm-hmm.
Then, as the temperature drops at night, the marble slowly radiates that stored heat back out, keeping the whole structure warm.
That's the exact thermal mechanics of it, yes. And they paired that material science with a total mastery over light and wind. The spatial layout, the orientation to the sun, the depth of the porticos, the covered porches around the building.
Right.
They were all perfectly designed to create these microclimates. The deep shadows cast by the columns would cool the air, and the structural layout naturally funneled the prevailing winds right through the space to create a constant passive breeze.
So they're literally letting the earth and the wind do all the heavy lifting.
Yes.
But the engineering gets even more impressive when the earth literally starts shaking.
Yeah.
Because you mentioned earlier that the floor is bowed and the columns tilt inward.
Yeah.
That science of curves actually functions as a masterclass in modern seismic engineering.
It really does. Because Greece sits in a highly active seismic zone. If the Parthenon had been built as a rigid, perfectly straight, unyielding box like our modern concrete bunkers, the sheer kinetic force of an earthquake would have shattered it centuries ago.
This goes back to that woven basket analogy from the text. How exactly did the stones move without the whole thing just collapsing on itself?
Because they didn't use mortar. They didn't glue the massive blocks together into one immovable monolith. They used dry-jointed stones.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, the blocks were carved so precisely that they just sat flush against each other, sometimes connected internally by iron clamps encased in lead, which allowed for a tiny bit of flexibility.
So it wasn't super rigid.
Right. When a massive earthquake hits, the building doesn't rigidly fight the tremor. The individual stones microshift. They actually rub against each other.
Wait, so the friction between those massive marble blocks actually dissipates the seismic energy?
Precisely. It absorbs the shock wave. The entire structure effectively dances with the earthquake, it yields to survive, and then it just returns to its stable center of gravity once the earth stops shaking.
Okay, let me stop you right there. Let me push back for a second. We're talking about this building like it's the ultimate indestructible survival map, right? The absolute pinnacle of harmony with nature. But I'm literally looking at photos of the Acropolis right now.
Right, it's a ruin.
Yeah, the roof is completely gone. Entire sides of the building are blown out. There's just rubble everywhere. If this future tech was so incredibly perfect at surviving, why is it in pieces today?
That is a very fair question, and the book addresses this head-on as the ultimate stress test. The fact that the Parthenon is a ruin today is not a failure of its engineering or its harmony with nature.
Okay.
It actually survived earthquakes, torrential rains, and baking heat perfectly for millennia. It wasn't the planet that broke the Parthenon, it was humanity.
Ah, yeah, the history of what we actually did to this building is dizzying. I mean, it went through these violent, constant identity changes based on whoever happened to conquer Athens at the time.
It really did. It began as the ultimate temple to Athena, a monument to ancient Greek culture. But as empires rose and fell, it was forcibly adapted. The ancient gods were evicted, and the Byzantine Empire transformed it into a Christian church dedicated to the Virgin Mary. They altered the entrance, they smashed statues.
Solely repurposed it.
Yeah, and later, the winds of history shifted again. The Ottoman Empire took over, and it became a mosque. They plastered over the ancient interior and literally built a minaret tower right on top of the ancient marble roof.
It's crazy that it had to absorb the cultural and religious whiplash of entire empires.
No.
But from what the archive novel details, the plaster and the minarets weren't actually what physically shattered the architecture.
No.
That happened in 1687.
Yes, the true catastrophe. During a major conflict, the Venetian fleet sailed into Athens and bombarded the Acropolis. And at that time, the Ottoman forces were using the Parthenon for a terrifyingly practical purpose.
A powder magazine?
Exactly. They were storing their massive reserves of gunpowder inside the temple, assuming the Venetians wouldn't dare fire on such a famous historical monument.
Which turned out to be a horrific miscalculation.
A completely tragic one, yeah. A Venetian mortar round crashed right through the roof and ignited the gunpowder. The resulting explosion was apocalyptic.
Oh, man.
It instantly blew out the entire center of the building, the roof disintegrated, and those perfectly proportioned, mathematically brilliant columns were blown outward, just tumbling into a massive field of scattered fragments.
And the indignities didn't even stop after it was blown to pieces. You have Lord Elgin showing up in the early 19th century, basically bribing the local authorities.
Yes, the Elgin marble.
Right, he's literally hacking the remaining marble relief sculptures, the famous metopes, off the ruins to ship them back to Britain.
It was devastating.
And then, during the Greek War of Independence, the occupying forces ran out of ammunition, so they started breaking apart the ancient columns. They were trying to melt down the lead clamps inside the stones just to cast them into musket bullets.
It's brutal, and this raises an important question about how we view and treat history, because the damage wasn't just physical, it was historical.
What do you mean?
Well, the book heavily discusses the subsequent purification efforts in the 19th and 20th centuries. Once Greece reclaimed the site, later generations tried to act like a historical erasure.
Oh, like scrubbing the timeline.
Exactly. They wanted to strip away all the rubble from the explosion, tear down the medieval additions, and remove any evidence of the Christian church and the Ottoman mosque. They wanted to return it to some idealized, pure Greek state, essentially trying to edit out its complex, messy past.
But despite all of that, despite being blown up, looted, melted down for ammunition, and historically edited, the core structure, that woven basket of marble, still stands.
It does. It survived us.
So what does this all mean for us today? The author's whole point is that this building is a map to healing our relationship with the planet. How do we put these pieces back together, literally and metaphorically, without just ruining it further.
Well, the literal process happening right now is called anastylosis. It is this painstaking, decades-long process of taking all those scattered, blown-up stones from 1687 and figuring out exactly where they originally belonged.
It's like a jigsaw puzzle.
A massive 2,500-year-old jigsaw puzzle, yeah. But you don't have the picture on the box, and half the pieces are just missing.
But even in our modern attempts to fix it, we let our arrogance get in the way again. Because the outline details a massive modern failure during the early restoration attempts in the 1920s.
Yes, unfortunately. Early restorers decided to put the fragmented columns back together using modern iron clamps and cores. They just assumed modern industrial iron was the ultimate strongest fix.
Because it's modern tech.
Right, but they completely lacked the ancient builders' understanding of environmental chemistry. When iron is exposed to the elements, specifically to the moisture and the acidic rain of modern polluted Athens, it rusts.
And when iron rusts, it undergoes a chemical reaction that makes it expand.
Exactly. The expanding rust inside the ancient stones exerted incredible pressure. It literally cracked the original marble from the inside out. So the modern fix ended up causing more structural damage than centuries of severe weather. It was a failure of arrogance. We just assumed our modern materials were inherently superior to the ancient dry joints.
So how do they solve that? Because they are actively restoring it now, right?
They are. Today, the successful adaptations rely on titanium. Titanium doesn't corrode or rust when exposed to moisture, so they use titanium joints to connect the ancient fragments.
Oh, smart.
And where large pieces of stone are missing entirely, they carve new pieces of white pentelic marble to just fill the gaps.
Yeah, I've seen photos of the current restoration. It creates this really striking visual harmony. You see the deeply scarred, golden, weathered ancient stone seamlessly locked together with this bright, pristine, white new marble.
It's beautiful.
They aren't trying to fake the history. They're letting the damage be visible.
Exactly, they're honoring the scars. And the author of the archive novel argues that this physical restoration, this anastylosis, is actually a profound metaphor for what we need to do as a society. It is the restoration of what the author calls the lost logos.
Logos. That is a pretty heavy philosophical term. How does the author define that in the context of, architecture and climate survival?
In this context, logos isn't just cold logic or math. It is the underlying order of things. It's the ancient wisdom that marries reason with nature.
Right.
Think back to the two characters in the novel. Dr. Lee Han represents the rigorous science, the titanium joints, the load-bearing calculations. Grace Kim represents the insight, the acceptance of the scars, the harmony with the environment.
I see.
Logos is the merging of those two. By studying how to put the Parthenon back together, we're being forced to relearn how they respected the materials, how they understood thermal mass, and how they built for resilience rather than just sheer defiance.
We're learning what the author called the proportion of humility. And I think that is the phrase that really anchors this entire deep dive for me. And honestly, that is the core takeaway for you listening to this right now.
Absolutely.
The Parthenon is not just a pretty tourist destination to snap a photo of on your summer vacation. It's an urgent warning, and it's a survival strategy.
It's a reminder that we cannot engineer our way out of a broken relationship with the earth simply by building thicker concrete walls.
Yeah, we can't just brute force it.
No, we need to design systems that dance with the tremors of our changing world rather than rigidly resisting until they just snap.
By adopting that ancient proportion of humility, we can completely rethink our own modern dwellings. We don't need to conquer nature. We need to accommodate it.
Well said.
And it leaves us with this final, lingering thought to mull over. Consider the towering, unbreakable glass and steel towers we build today to scrape the sky. If our modern civilization were to fall, if we fast forward 2,500 years, will our rigid, unyielding ruins teach future generations anything about harmony with nature? Or will they merely serve as a cautionary tale of a society that forgot the vital strength of building with humility and imperfection?
So, what if the blueprint for our future wasn't sitting in some high-tech lab, but was actually carved in stone 2,500 years ago in an ancient temple? Well, that's the exact idea we're going to dive into. Just think about our cities today. I mean, we live in this age of architectural miracles, right? We've got these incredible glistening skyscrapers made of steel and glass that just shoot up into the clouds. And yet, there's this really strange paradox. For all our amazing technology, a lot of us feel more anxious and, well, more insecure than ever inside these modern fortresses. And that really brings up a huge question. As we're facing down things like climate change and all sorts of other crises, why do the very structures that are meant to keep us safe suddenly feel so incredibly fragile? What is the one crucial thing that we're missing? To get to the bottom of this, we first got to really look at the problem with how we do things now. We have to examine just how vulnerable our modern world has become. Now, an architect at the center of this whole analysis says that our modern buildings, these sleek, beautiful towers, they have a massive flaw. They were all built on one big assumption, that the world around them would be stable. But as we're seeing with fires, floods, and crazy weather, their weakness is being laid bare for all to see. So this forces us to completely rethink everything. And it's not just about, finding better materials or inventing smarter tech. The question goes way, way deeper than that. It's really about the entire philosophy, the mindset that we bring to the table when we build our homes and our cities. And that search for a totally new mindset, well, it takes us somewhere pretty unexpected. We're not looking to the future for this one. We're going deep into the past, to an ancient ruin sitting on a hill in Athens. The Parthenon. Come on, we've all seen pictures of it. It's basically the symbol of Western civilization. We look at it as this incredible ruin, a relic from a time long gone. We admire its beauty. We learn about its history. We see it as this amazing monument to what used to be, kind of like a postcard from the past. But what if looking at it that way means we're missing the entire point? What if the Parthenon isn't just some old ruin that we're supposed to admire from a distance? What if it's more like a living textbook, a blueprint that's jam-packed with sustainable ideas that we've simply forgotten how to read? So what exactly is this hidden wisdom we're talking about? Okay, let's start decoding the genius that's carved right into those famous marble columns. All right, take a look at those columns. Here's something wild. If they were perfectly mathematically straight, our own eyes would trick us. They'd look like they were curving inwards, making them seem weak and unstable. The ancient Greeks knew this, so they came up with a brilliant fix called entasis. They actually built the columns with a tiny, subtle outward bulge, which makes them appear perfectly straight and strong to our flawed human eyes. Now, you might just be thinking, okay, that's a pretty neat optical illusion, a clever trick. But the thinking behind it is about something so much deeper. This wasn't the Greeks just showing off their tech skills. It was actually the exact opposite. It was this incredible act of humility. They were designing in harmony with how people actually see things, accepting our flaws and working with them. This is architecture that's built for real people, not for some abstract idea of perfection. And this idea, it's baked into the entire building. It was designed to manage sunlight and wind for natural air conditioning. Its structure wasn't rigid and stiff. It was built to have flexibility, to literally dance with earthquakes instead of shattering. Even the marble they chose was picked for how it adapts to the environment. And here's the key. Its so-called perfection is really a masterclass in designing for imperfection. And the proof is in the pudding, right? It's survived. For 2,500 years, the Parthenon has been through it all. It's been a temple, a church, a mosque. It was blown up, it was looted, it was shot at, and yet the core of it is still standing. A powerful testament to just how resilient this humble design really is. So, what on earth does all of this mean for us, here, today? How do we take these lessons from so long ago and actually apply them to the challenges that we're facing right now? The biggest lesson here is about a huge shift in our mindset. The Parthenon is telling us that our endless chase for more and more complicated technology might actually be taking us down the wrong road. The real way forward might be in getting back a different kind of wisdom, one that's all about humility, harmony, and respect for both people and the planet. So what are the big lessons we can pull from this stone? Well, first, we need to embrace that humble attitude in our designs. Build for real, imperfect people. Second, we have to build with the environment, not against it. Third, we've got to understand that real strength comes from being flexible, not from being rigid. And finally, we have to recover what the source calls the principle of dwelling, that simple but powerful idea of creating spaces where we feel truly at home in the world. The source actually describes this rediscovery of ancient wisdom as an arc of hope. It's such a powerful metaphor, isn't it? The idea is that this ancient knowledge can be a vessel, something to carry us through the stormy seas of the modern world and give a little bit of a map to the people who come after us. So it turns out the past has offered us a map, a blueprint built on humility. The real question isn't where we can find the answers anymore. It's whether we're finally going to be wise enough to follow them.